Welcome everyone. This is a very special interview here on KikoChat. Fallon McDermott and the Improbable team, Lee and Jeremy, are going to be showing us the very impressive events that they've been able to put together using online open space. My name's Lucas. I'm based in New York. I'm an open space facilitator and a software engineer. Let me turn it over to Heidi, who is on our team also, and then we'll go around the room. Please do a quick 15-second introduction of yourself, and we'll get right into the interview.
My name is Heidi. I'm in Santa Fe, New Mexico. We moved a very large 3-day open space conference online at the end of April, and I fell in love with what KikoChat could do. Our participants really enjoyed it, and I'm happy to be working with Lucas now as he grows KikoChat for open space and all other kinds of events. So welcome, and I'm really looking forward to this.
Thanks, Heidi. So the floor is open. Take 10, 15 seconds, introduce yourself, and we'll just keep it open. Go right around the room, then we'll get right into the interview.
Hi, my name's Leanne. I'm in London. I've come here via Art of Hosting. Jamie and I just did an open space on Friday, which Nikki was at as well, using Kiko. So yeah, and I've heard lots about Improbable, so it's really exciting to have them combined.
Hi everyone, my name is Leah Taylor. I'm coming from the Vermont state in the United States of America. I work with the Center on Rural Innovation. I'm the program manager for our Rural Innovation Initiative. And we are transitioning our usually in-person strategic development workshops for economic development to online. So I'm here to learn. Thank you.
Hello everyone, my name is Lee and I'm one of the co-artistic directors of Improbable, and we're a theatre company who also do and have been doing for a while now open space, and are really enjoying the beginning of this online open space journey.
Hi, I'm Tony, based at Centre for Innovation and Learning and Teaching at University of Cape Town, South Africa. Steeped in lots of earlier approaches to online facilitation and making that transition to the new approaches.
Hi, my name is Tom Brown. I'm in Metuchen, New Jersey. I work with cultural nonprofits, including theaters and museums, and have done facilitation through open space within that community.
Hi, I'm Lucy. I'm from Stroud in the UK. I'm getting ready to host an open space, and I've been participating in open space through the art hosting community. So here to learn. Thanks.
So hello, I'm Ann Stadler. I was on mute a few minutes ago. I'm a first follower of open space way back when, and have been opening space since then. Hello, Lucas. And I'm very, I work in India, and my Indian colleagues want to do open space every year. And so I'm participated in Salem and the Improbable open space, which I thought was amazing because it's so mobile and fluid. And I'm really eager to help them so that they continue to be able to do the whole enchilada, not be constricted by the Zoom constraints. So I'm delighted that you decided to do this. Thank you.
Hi, hi, I'm Francois Nuco, calling from London. I've been exploring KikoChat now for quite a bit. Got a couple of conferences coming up I'm in the process of, which were converted to open space because dialogue is so much more important. And I'm looking to use KikoChat for a number of areas. I'm keenly interested to hear. I have limited experience of using it so far, so I'm keenly interested in hearing Phelim's experience of it. Hi, Phelim.
Hi, I'm Suzanne Daigle, and I'm driving, so I'm going to be very brief, and I'm just going to say I am nuts about open space since I've been introduced to it years ago. I am nuts about KikoChat too, and its prospects, so excited. And the third thing I'm super excited about is who's on this call. Oh my God, it's awesome. So now I'll sign off, and I'm just listening and staying safe. Thank you.
Hey, Suzanne.
Hi, I'm Nikki. I have done a few things, hosted a couple of things in KikoChat and really love it. It's just so wonderfully fluid, and I really love to see what you guys can share with us about your experience and learn any new ideas, tips to share in creating more open space. So looking forward to hearing what you guys have been doing. Thanks.
Yeah, hello. This is Rolf from Germany, close to Cologne I'm living. And I'm here because I have also 1 hour next week for introducing a project where we did design thinking with 350 students. And I'm curious to see how Phelim will do it, and also to get some new impressions about how can I use KikoChat, and also in the context of open space. So I'm here. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Jeremy. I've got the rather unwieldy job title at the moment of Operations and Finance Officer and Open Space Online Producer. I've been tech facilitating our recent Open Space Online events.
Hi, my name's Jamie. I'm a facilitator and art hosting practitioner. It's nice to see friends on here today as well. I've been working with Leanne and Nikki and Lucy to begin a kind of series of open space experiments using KikoChat within the art hosting community. And we're throwing 2 parties in not this weekend, but next weekend, using KikoChat as well, and doing cooking and dancing and all sorts of things. So just here to learn and to hear stories. Thanks.
Great. And Tony, I think we got everybody else.
Hello, everybody. Glad to be here. I live in Northeast Ohio. I'm a retired auto worker and did community organizing for 40 years in a General Motors plant. And now I'm using my skill set to do community organizing and learning this wonderful thing called open space and KikoChat. Thank you.
Fantastic. I think everybody got a chance to introduce themselves. So I'll turn it over to our team at Improbable, and please feel free to ask your questions in the chat in Zoom or on KikoChat on the notes page, and I'll make sure they get inserted into our dialogue. Yeah, I look forward to learning today.
Hello, everybody. Nice to see people. I'm sitting in my attic, still in lockdown, with our shielded granny, where I've run all the open space events that we've been doing from the comfort of my attic. Just a little background material. We're a theatre company, so we make shows. At the core of our practice is improvisation. Even if we're doing plays or operas, there'll be a sensibility about how we make them that is to do with being present and being in the moment, and taking that practice into how we make shows. So sometimes our shows are totally improvised, sometimes they're made through improvisation, and sometimes they're like they're already written as operas or plays, but they have an intention to keep them alive, and so on. So the journey that we've been on with Open Space began about 15 years ago, where I first read Harrison's book and read the book and kind of thought, this is what's happening with Open Space and what Harrison's doing, and this idea is kind of what I'd been trying to do in my rehearsal room for years and aiming at. But it dealt with all the things that I never had the energy to deal with outside of the rehearsal room. So I would often hide in a rehearsal room and create what I now know was open space in those spaces. I wrote an invitation, which was called Devoted and Disgruntled, What Are We Going to Do About Theatre? And that question is still live 15 years later. We're still opening space around that question. And we've been doing it as a big annual event. Often that's at its peak, it kind of hits around 350, 400 people as a live event for the theatre community and the arts community. Throughout the year, we do what we call satellite events, and often they are events that emerge from that big open space. So some of the questions that emerge from the big event are like harvested as live kind of emergent topics that then get their own special focused open space events. Or at the event, the annual event, sometimes people will come and then say, will you come and do an event for the opera community, or the dance community, or whatever that is. So there's an ongoing narrative of our open space events that we do as practitioners. That process of opening space, it's how we start, how we make our shows. I open space at the start of a rehearsal process, even if it's a small element of the open space process. I'll try and make that happen. So sometimes that's an easy thing to do when it's your own rehearsal room. Sometimes it's more challenging when it's the Metropolitan Opera and you're trying to open space in creaky old hierarchical structured buildings. But we do it, and it's kind of at the core of our practice. So the journey around this Open Space Online event, of course, is that at the beginning of the year in January, we had our big open space event. And then what happened in the world happened in the world. And my own inner resistance to doing stuff online, openings, as you know, Heidi mentioned it in her talk, but the love of the live event, of course, the improvised event, had to be dropped because we were all in our separate spaces, trying to think about how we might open space around the issues. That was a crisis. In a way, the whole theatre community, as you may know, is in crisis because the one thing that you can't do now is meet in a large group. And that's basically what theatre, if you're lucky and people buy tickets, that's what you're aiming for. So as a company, we had a fast track journey towards learning how to open space online. So we're real naives here. So I guess the value of what we might tell you is that we don't know how to do it. Improvisation, we still don't know how to do it. We still don't know how to open space online, but we learn things on the way. What I would say is that when I first engaged with the open space community and the OS list, I was incredibly touched by how generous the spirit is of that community over the years. People like Suzanne and and Harrison and Tom, who's here, in the journey of us saying, how do you open space online, were incredibly responsive, put us in touch with Lucas, who are also incredibly generous. So I guess you might hear what it's like to fast track. some of the things I would say is there's a very particular way that or a very particular culture that we engage with our D&D events. So in some ways, we've had a journey in how to try and keep that feeling with how we use Kiko. We do some of our money as a theatre company that supports us does come through doing more corporate business events, but actually at the core of our work is a sensibility which is about art, artists, improvisation. So there is a sensibility around the low fineness of it, or the analog nature of it, that is there in how we've done it. So, and it connects also to Harrison's thing about not too many bells and whistles. You know, we are basically at this moment in one great big bell and whistle, which is technology online. So it's about the conversation between those two impulses, I would say. The other thing that I'd mention is that our D&D events have our live embodied D&D events have been on a journey around things like access. So there are elements to what we try to do with our online thing, which is part of our journey around making the event as accessible as possible. So the sensibility is not, although there are a lot of people who know us through our open space events, we did have this sensibility that the people who might turn up would know nothing. And that the way we introduced the whole Kiko platform and also open space, we made the assumption that there would be people at the event who'd never been to an open space event and who didn't know anything about Kiko and that platform. Some of them we knew may know about Zoom spaces and what that's like. And I would say very much part of the impetus of going, let's sort this out online, was because of my own frustrations with the power, the inherent power structures around us all being in a bunch of hierarchical squares. I'm at the top because I've been pinned, or I'm the, you know, designated speaker. How do you create the open space circle experience online? And for me as a theatre practitioner, the way in was about imaginative space. So we knew we would be talking to theatre practitioners, and the big challenge of facilitating was about how to include that imaginative space. And Heidi mentioned it in her talk about imagining people around the globe. But I did, in my own personal, like, the biggest thing is working on your idea as a facilitator online. You know, my comfort zone is standing in a circle of people with a big empty space in the middle. I wanted to make an invitation to the people who joined us in Kiko to imagine that circle, to imagine me walking around. Very much what I notice about Zoom is people try and connect this way through the screen here. And I wanted to invite people to connect 300, I even got it wrong, I said 350 degrees, 360 degrees in all directions. Now that's a theatre practice thing, or a performer, that you take your energy out. So there was a kind of vocabulary there that I invited people to engage with, and to imagine that space in the middle that was empty. And the conversation between the technology and that imaginative space is quite an interesting one that we're only beginning to explore, I would say. We were partnering with a company called Battersea Art Centre, which is a big London art centre. It's an old town hall building, which actually burnt down and has been rebuilt. And just at the point when it has been rebuilt and was ready to kind of start engaging as a new venue, the lockdown happened. But Battersea Art Centre has designated itself as a relaxed space. Now, those of you who don't know about theatre performances, what that basically means is that it's a welcoming space for a certain kind of response and interaction from the audience. And it was initially, for instance, a welcoming space to people who might be neurodiverse, say autistic people, and a welcoming space for people in the audience to vocalize, make as much noise as you want, get as emotional as you want, make as, you know, basically open space around people's reactions around theatre. So that was also a useful collaboration to us to invite the way that one interacted with the Zoom and the screen was a relaxed space. So I had some talks with my wife, who holds space for mothers who make, and she said, you know, you put yourself on mute, you can make as much noise as you want, you can move around the space, you can cry, you can get emotional, you can laugh. So actually there's an invitation in the technology to invite impulses. Law of 2 feet says you can move away from the screen. It's what you don't often see in Zoom interactions. An artistic sensibility around play, around the reaction to the screen, around where you take yourself. It's this space altogether, all our little screens, but we're also inviting all our individual homes and workspaces into this space as well, which is kind of a radical thing in the world at the moment, because there's a diversity issue here, which is people's children are there, people's different lives. You're seeing a different kind of hierarchy and a different kind of rank issues around that, which are interesting, and I think are moments of opportunity to invite into our shared space. That the other thing I would say, and I'll try and I'm aware I'm talking a lot, but it is an interview, so I guess that's fine. Me and Lee and Jeremy, we decided we'd write ourselves a script, and we realized that there were different areas of how one opened the space and introduced the platform that we could look after. That I went online and was so impressed by Lucas and how calm he was around the tech stuff. And I would say that, you know, we asked Jeremy to, can you be as good as Lucas in how calm he is? And, you know, I not wanting to sing our own praises too much, I would say Jeremy's done really, really well at fast tracking to being a calm tech facilitator, which is an interesting role because it's a different kind of role that's in this journey. That left me free to do the kind of spirit of open space stuff. And then Lee, and we often work as a team, I would say, and he may want to say what his role is, but in a way, Lee is like, if it was a role in that holding of the space, it's like imagining what you're like if you were a naive participant. So Lee was holding I'll explain this really clearly, how you post your issues, and we could use Lee to demonstrate that. And then the only other thing I'll mention before I ask Jeremy and Lee to say something is, in the fast tracking, we did a thing where we went, let's do some small events. So we did some garden events that were of roughly around 30 to 40 people. And then slowly we tracked up to 100 participants. And we did we got some ally companies to say, so there's an organisation called Theatre Bristol. We said, we'll do one for you, for your community. It's not it was like an in-between public-private event. We let them know it's a pilot and let them know we're learning as we go. And our sensibility in our shows and how we work is that you show the workings, and actually people are very forgiving and enjoy it. So our fast tracking has been about slowly scaling up. We announced we said we were going to do three events, I think. we announced them and they filled up to 100 people capacity in 48 hours. And we then had a 250 people waiting list. This was before we'd done any advertising. So the hunger and the need for these events was kind of shocking. We then added a fourth event where we said we'll let the 250 people who are on the waiting list in, and any others who come in and whatever. And I think that event went to around 190, 200 at its peak of participants. That's all happened over a space of, how long have we had, Jeremy or Lee?
About, I'd say maybe a month and a bit.
Month and a bit. With a kind of like 2 week, before we did our first one online was probably about 2 weeks, is that right?
Before we,
as
yeah.
we were exploring the platforms and
I
stuff.
think I think I seem to remember we maybe had three weeks, and we were aiming to do a test every week.
Yeah.
To scale up to it.
Yeah. Now we would not have been able to do that without Lucas's support. He's been fantastic, and Suzanne really helped us connect to Lucas. So I'm not saying this again, but thanks to the support of this community. So I guess this is absolutely part of this same process of supporting us and each other as communities to open space as much as we can. I don't quite know what if maybe Lee and Jeremy, you want to say anything about that same journey?
I feel like you've covered it really well. I don't really have anything much to add. The things I would pick up is our kind of naivety, our willingness to just do it, and maybe get it wrong, but to do it with a kind of innocence and an honesty, or try to do that anyway. And to keep it simple. I think that's always been our approach, to try not to stray too far from what we feel like is the spirit of the thing, and to not be kind of hypnotized by too much fancy stuff, and to know that the thing that people take away from it is that sense of connection. But yeah.
And I think the idea that they could go away, do it too, even if they don't know how much Jeremy's sweating in the background. That Harrison's idea when we first were opening space, we used to draw the signs up every time we did it, and for like 2 or 3 years, we actually went, we would get people to help us, and it was part of doing it. But that says you can do it too. All you need is some felt pens and some masking tape, and you can do it too. That feels important, even in this online situation. When I talk through the principles, I use my own little cards, holding them up as a way to say, analog, lo-fi. It's about the spirit of how that's done. The moment where I lost my bumblebees and my butterflies, and I had to draw them fast myself, were probably better than the ones that I have beautifully printed up as little cards. But that spirit, I think, is good online because it's got a humanity to it, and it helps people connect. Yeah. Jeremy, did you want to say anything?
I think just speaking to what you're talking about what we've designated as the tech facilitator's role, and reflecting on the journey, the ongoing journey. There's still so many things I'm learning, and I'm not saying that as a trite thing. There are genuinely still so many things I'm like, I don't know how the fuck to do this, and part of what I've really enjoyed about it is that problem solving element. But I think what I'd say about the journey that we've taken is, I found that the the key part of the role that I play within our events is comfort with the technology. And that's only come through playing with it and testing it over and over again, sometimes by myself, sometimes with the team. Like the calmness, or the appearance of calmness that Phelan mentioned, I think only comes through knowing it back to front, or knowing at the very least your bits back to front, and knowing how to, so much of my role in those events is about troubleshooting people. And the only reason I'm able to do that with any degree of efficacy is because I understand, for the most part, how the tech bits work, and so I know what I need to do to improvise around issues or problems that crop up. And similarly, I know Phelan's talked about this, and I'm happy to answer questions later on about this. But with all the access things, Zoom. The internet, really, a lot of it can be really exclusive to people who are deaf or who have visual impairments, and a lot of the technologies that we use and maybe take for granted as ways for us to communicate aren't open to people with various different needs, levels of needs and requirements. So part of my role has been thinking of ways around the technical limitations, or thinking kind of slightly laterally about that, and so that's been part of the journey as well. And I've really enjoyed that. I've just recently been on phone calls yesterday and today talking to people about how we've managed to facilitate some of the access online, which is really surprising for me, because I'm like, I've been doing this for 2 weeks. I don't know at what point I suddenly became the arbiter of access online. I certainly am not, and do not claim to be. But we figured out some stuff that works, and I'm happy to speak more to that later on as well, if people are interested. Yeah,
Jeremy, I'm hoping you can, because what your group did with access, I think, was cutting edge. And Phelan spoke to how access is core to the DNA of your events and your organization. Can you talk about how you made these events more accessible, or as accessible as technically possible at the moment?
Sure. You want me to do that now, or?
Yeah, if you want, please do.
Yeah, sure. Where to start? I've just been thinking about this a lot in the kind of run up to the event we ran on last Tuesday, and then since then. In a lot of ways, it's accumulation of, a lot of the work that so many disability activists have done before in creating like a body of knowledge. So many great writers out there, writers, activists, looking at how this transition to online working has affected people with disabilities. And so, and I think at the core of that process, and something I've realized, talking to people about it over the last 2 days, is, and the core of it has always been, whether you're talking about real world events or online events, awareness around the potential barriers to access that people have, and then the ways that you solve them are neither here nor there. So it works for some people, it doesn't work for some people. Sometimes the solutions that you put in work for a certain group and don't work for other groups. The very act of going online has enabled people who would never have been able to access our physical events do that, and has also restricted other people from accessing them who would have attended our physical events. So I think that, just as a thing to start with, with the access things, I think there are loads of like tech tips, but at the core of it, it's about a commitment to making sure that anyone who wants to can have a rewarding experience, even if that differs between from person to person.
One of the things, Jeremy, sorry to interrupt you. One of the things that we did is that we have text captioning. So using the Zoom captioning meant that both opening and closing of our roughly 4-hour events, we're in that territory, had closed captioning at the bottom. So there's a Zoom option for that at the bottom, which actually not just for people who absolutely need that, as part of the event is incredibly supportive around dealing with. So there's the closed caption option there at the bottom. So we work with a company called, are they called Stage Text? Am I getting that? Stage Text. And they work with live performance watching and live captioning what the performers are saying. So they would live caption what the facilitators were doing at the beginning. It then appears as a transcript, which you can, for instance, you can go away from the screen and you can come back and catch up if you've left the screen. And as a record of the whole event, there's something really valuable in that. So that's just one little element. The other thing that we did on our very final event was we had Bsl Interpreters, which is British Sign Language, and they signed they signed opening and closing, but then we had to support them to follow people who might want to go into breakout rooms. And that was in the background quite a big facilitation job, which Jeremy probably knows more about, but involved being live to what's happening in the chat at the side, also available on phone for support if someone gets stuck. So that's one example of what I would say about that was that in our last we did our last event about a week ago now, which was the kind of 200 people. In closing, we had some definite moments where we had to like quite upfront facilitate tech issues that came up for people who wanted BSL translation, because being able to follow where the signer was. And I was really touched by what happened with the open space event was that people were really comfortable, were actually really positive about that part being something that was very important part of the whole event. It wasn't like, oh no, we've got to deal with this access issue. It was almost the opposite. People could feel it was a positive contribution to the open space event. So I'm mentioning that to just let you know, the more you show you're dealing with those access issues, the more support you will get from an open space community. So don't think you have to have it all sorted out and be ahead of the game. Be prepared to make it up as you go along. If you say that's what you're doing, the community will hold it. That's what open space does really well. Of course, that's for access, but it's for all of it. And it's what we've learned from improvisation, which is when things go wrong, a part of you believes you're going to spoil things by saying, oh no, it's gone wrong. Actually, you add something by saying, things have gone wrong, we're present. Our presence in the moment models what the world can be like, which is that there's an issue here. Let's sort it as a community now. And I felt the whole group holding that in a way that I had never quite experienced before. It was really exciting.
Yeah, I wonder if I might just talk about access generally. I have so many, these conversations I've been having over the past 2 days. I have so many like specific tech things. I don't know if that's necessarily useful to go through now, because it depends on what kind of event you're running and who's coming, who's going, who's
Can you
attending.
share with us one specific tech thing so it gives each of us a sense of how deep one of these might go?
Sure. So predominantly the people with disabilities who attended the event were deaf participants. So they used a combination of British Sign Language and captioning, with each person. I effectively asked each person to declare a preference for BSL or captioning, because the idea was that we would then assign British Sign Language interpreters or a captioner to follow them into breakout spaces. I'm going to focus on the interpreters because that was more complex. We had 7 BSL interpreters with us at the event. And we booked on 5 people who had expressed BSL as their preferred language. I think in the end 3 of them showed up, which is actually good because normally we would assign 2 BSL interpreters per person. What interpreters have said is interpreting a live event in breakout space is really exhausting. So you normally need 2 interpreters who alternate. And we had the same thing in opening and closing circle. However, what that means is that people find it really difficult to identify where the interpreters were in opening and closing circle just because of the number of people in that Zoom conversation. We found the use of the spotlight in Zoom really, really useful. If only just to allow the deaf participants to be able to easily spot where the interpreter was in their Zoom window and then pin them. So the spotlight function, in case you don't know, is a function that if you're the host of the meeting, it's basically like you pin the video for everyone. So for a couple seconds whilst I had them spotlighted, there we go, everyone would have seen the interpreter, or Phelan in this case. Everyone would see Phelan big on their screen, and then once the spotlight's turned off, you can go back to your gallery mode. But it just means that and if I go back to gallery mode, whoever is spotlighted has that yellow speaking box highlighted around them, even if they're not actively speaking. So what it means is the deaf participants could go back into gallery mode, find the interpreter, and then pin them. And it just helps in that transition between swapping BSL interpreters. It was kind of mucky at the beginning, and this is something that we found out halfway through the event as the suggestion of one of the other participants. And that's just kind of one of the ways where we helped people navigate the event. I mean, there's a couple other things. We had a separate WhatsApp chat with the interpreters, us as hosts. It was me and a colleague of mine, Ben, and all the BSL users. So they could say, hey, I'm going to this room. Could you send someone there to interpret? And we could do that across the event. And it's more responsive because it means that people can have an eye on the Zoom chat and also have an eye on their phones. I mean, there was a suggestion that we should keep the logistics as a separate chat, but I think we'll take that on board for next time. But just having some meta event stuff to give some structure to it is really useful. I mean, that kind of goes for the whole what's the word? At every stage in the process, we did something in order to support people. So sorry, Lucas, I know this isn't one thing. This is actually just the whole bit. So it goes everything from pre-booking right up until the event, the end of the event. So pre-booking, part of the impetus for us was that in the first 3 events we ran, we noticed that we'd hired BSL interpreters, but there wasn't anyone who necessarily needed the interpretation. So we made an effort when we released tickets for our 4th event to go out to networks, disability-led organizations that we knew would be able to reach people with different access needs, because we knew that they need to be part of these conversations involving the whole theatre sector. When they booked, they declared what their access need was. I would then get in touch with everyone who had declared a specific access need in person, not in person, over email, or I would call them up and just talk through what they needed. So we had people who were deaf and visually impaired on the event, as well as people who were neurodiverse or had other kind of access needs. I mainly focused on people who are deaf and visually impaired because that's the bit where the tech gets in the way. We held orientation sessions. I think, Lucas, that's a suggestion that came from you. So I would do, and this is for everyone, I would do morning and evenings a couple days before the event. I effectively do my version of the housekeeping Zoom tutorial at the top of it, and then talk people through how to go into Kiko chat and swap between the breakout spaces, use the notepads. And then I strongly recommend that anyone who expressed that they had access needs join one of those orientation sessions, because it's far easier to talk them through it in a relaxed portion of space and time than it is to try and cram it all in at the beginning of the event. We asked them to arrive around 15 minutes early so anyone using Bsl interpreters or captioners could meet the people captioning and interpreting for them, recognize their faces. One thing we learned is to recommend that everyone has their videos off at this point, because when there are 4 people signing at once, it's impossible for anyone to navigate. And then we did the thing that we did for the sessions. We would assign each person a captioner or a set of interpreters, and they would follow them into the breakout spaces. As much as possible, we tried to make sure that the interpreters were people we've worked with before, either in real world open space or who had been to an open space before. Some of the feedback we got from the interpreters is it's actually really intimidating to do interpretation in open space when you've never done it before, because the format is very different, especially for a lot of the interpreters we work with who are used to interpreting for stage. That interactivity is really different and becomes even more complex when you're in an online environment. So the familiarity with it, and as Phelim said, the permission giving to hold and stop and for, you know, time for the interpreters to go, actually, hold on, do you mind if we pause? We're just going to swap. Or do you mind if we pause? I just need to make sure Katie's fine with this, and everyone stopping to let that happen is great. We had an access support worker as well, a woman called Hannah Quigley, who was there floating and assisting me with going into different breakout spaces, making sure that everyone who had access needs was okay with it. And for the most part, they were. But just kind of the support in place that people know where to go if they have any issues. I'm going to stop talking now. I think that's enough.
Well, that was tremendous. And I had no idea of the depth of preparations. So when other people who are doing events where this is as important, they will come and watch this video right from where you were speaking. That was tremendously powerful. I was wondering if one of you could give a brief tour of your space. I thought it was particularly beautiful and comforting and welcoming. And I also liked what I saw you do that I hadn't seen another group do, is who was in the room. You had a tool for understanding who was in the room.
Lee, do you want to do the talking and I'll do the demonstrating like we do in the event?
I guess I don't know what you're going to do though, but
I'll just follow with you. I'll follow along with you. If you do a version of your bit, and I'll just.
Okay. Jeremy's fed up with talking. It's clear, clearly. He's fed up with the sound of his own voice. All right. Well, share your screen and let's see where we are. Okay. So yeah.
Sorry. Whilst I'm sharing my screen, sorry, Lee.
Yeah.
One thing that has been so useful in working with Bsl interpreters when sharing screens is Zoom has an option for a side-by-side mode. I actually prefer using it nowadays when someone shares their screen. If you look at the top of your Zoom screen, now I've shared my screen, and this is only while someone is sharing their screen, you'll see view options up at the top, and if you click that, you can activate side-by-side mode, and that'll take you out of the full screen screen share and split your screen into 2 sides, where one side is gallery view or speaker view, so effectively everyone's faces, and then the other side is the screen share. But the key thing is you can change the size of the screen that's being shared. So if you have a Bsl interpreter pinned, or even you just want to be able to look at whoever's talking big on your screen, and you're not so worried about what's being shared, if it's a big PowerPoint or whatever, you can, it just gives you that flexibility to be able to see someone at the same time. Sorry, that's it.
So this is the kind of home, this is where people arrived. Our event was called Time for Respair, a conversation about theatre and the future. So respair is a word that I think Phelim found. For those not in the UK, there's a woman called Susie Dent who is words. She does words, and she often has a word of the day. And this is an old English word meaning to recover from despair, to come back from despair. So respair. So we're trying to, that's why that's called that. So this is where people arrived, and the welcome tab just it's very simple, has our timetable, and then further down Jeremy's number, so people could text him or call him if they couldn't find us online and they were having some tech troubles. The other tabs we had, the next one was the marketplace, which is what we called the agenda wall or whatever you might, where people would type in their sessions. Oh, this has changed. This is the new style Etherpad coming. Oh, I've not seen this. Nice. So this, yeah, a very, very basic Etherpad for people to type in their sessions once they had announced them on Zoom. And those are the sessions that we had. The next one along is Who Are You? So this is a series of questions, little sort of fun things for people to fill in, which kind of ask different questions about people and their identity. And we do this at our big D&D events. In fact, this sort of came from the participants. This wasn't us. People started off their own bat to create an area of the room where people could fill in where they'd come from, who they were, what their job was, what their political views were, what their religious views were, and all this sort of thing. And we sort of thought it was really nice. It was really lovely to get that information. It's totally optional. We just show it to people at the top of the event, and they can fill it in if they want to. The next one along is the principles. Pretty obvious. But yeah, we'll wait and have a little look at them because they're rather nice. Phelan drew them. There they are. So they're just always there, and that tab is in all the spaces as well. And then the next one is the notice board, which is precisely that. So Jeremy embedded this notice board for people to pin things up that they wanted to bring people's attention to. It was also a place right in the middle there, the little pink thing that's just disappearing. It was a place where we could put links to the reports from previous events in the series. So this was a series of 4 events with the same question. And so people could find the reports from those events on this notice board. But this was completely open for people to pin whenever they wanted to.
It's an app called Padlet. It's free. You can create up to 3 of them for free, and you embed them in the same way as you embed anything else within KikoChat Breakout Space.
The top left-hand corner is a little photo. That's the photo of the last embodied open space that we held in January. That's the Great Hall at BAC, which is the theatre that we worked with on these events. And that's the part of the building that burned down a couple of years ago now, maybe. And that's the rebuilt version. So that's kind of our real world open space. So we put that up just so people can imagine what it's like. Shall we go into a space, Jeremy? So our spaces are called after animals. That's just a tradition that's grown up over the years.
It grew from Wosenos, actually.
Oh, did it?
Because we were looking for something that visually would translate. So a picture of an animal was like international.
Yes, in the early days, we were so kind of bespoke in our approach that we would, whatever community we were doing our event for, we would create open space names relating to them. So if it was the Poetry Society, they would be poets. If it was a dance event, it would be great choreographers and all that sort of thing. But of course, we spent hours and hours trying to think up all these things. So in the end, once we settled on animals, we stuck with them. And again, this is inside the space. Very, very simple. An Etherpad for people to write their notes. And our template is almost not a template. It's simply, the prompts really are only session title, session convener, participant names, and then sometimes we write, I think also it's please feel free to make notes. So nothing more than that, something very, very open in terms of people's note taking. Down the bottom, we had a couple of other spaces. We had an art room, which is where people could just draw. So Jeremy, what did you...
I can't, you know what? I can't even remember what it's called. I think it was called like Group Board or something. It's a very lo-fi whiteboard style internet-based canvas thing. You basically just get the link, you register for a board, it's just like a blank whiteboard, and you just take the link and you embed it again like anything else into the KikoChat breakout spaces. We just thought it'd be fun. to do it. I don't know I don't know if anything, this is fun.
One of the things that we talked about was that sometimes in the invitation in how people are in their breakout sessions around listening and focusing, we encourage people to have, if they wanted to doodle whilst they're listening, or to take notes that you might want to email afterwards rather than just feel you have to type. I often say, please don't feel anything can happen in open space. Please don't feel it just has to be a particular kind of conversation. You could make a show, you could video a dance report, so the invitation for people to interpret what happens in the open space as open as possible. I don't know if we always manage to communicate that, but sessions where everybody turns their video off and they all hang out in the dark together, just reminding people, if you say conversation and you see a particular kind of question, it seems to suggest you just have to talk, but that's not always the case.
It partly grew out of our real world open space events, the big D&Ds, where some traditional spaces, people would use spaces in different ways. So there was one that happened every year eventually that was called Tea with the Gays. So all the gays would gather and people could have tea with them. There was lemon jousting, where people would put lemons on wooden spoons and have a joust. There'd often be a nap session. So we really encourage people to, because discussion, intellectual discussion, is not everybody's preferred mode of communication or connection. So we really try to support people if they wanted to do something a little different to that. We had a butterfly room down at the bottom again, a couple of butterfly rooms maybe, and a quiet space for people to be quiet in if they wanted to, and a hallway, because it felt like that. I think that was Lucas, a suggestion from Lucas, that was kind of sense of a hallway feels like a place where cool kids hang out. We were very excited when we watched Heidi, the idea of linking the gardens. So the gardens might be a place where people go to kind of hang out in a less formal way. We haven't done that because we hadn't thought of that. So that's a fantastic tip that we picked up from Heidi. So I think that's something we're going to try and work in
I think
some of our future events.
I think these parallel worlds now of online and embodied. One of the things that we got feedback from was that in a real world, this is actually the real world as well, I know. In real world open space, the moments where you, for instance, you're in a bigger room and you can feel the atmosphere of the other conversations and you're drawn to them, and the fact that when you go from group to group, you find yourself in the role of a butterfly or a bumblebee, that's harder to emulate online. So these intermediate transitional spaces, how do we support that to still happen? And Heidi talked about this as well. The thing that butterflies often do is they hook up with someone and they have a one-to-one, or you see someone, you go, I can't get them at the moment, they're in that session, but in 3 hours I'll grab them at the coffee. How this would be some research to ask our community, how do we support that to happen as an imaginative space? I think just naming it at the beginning of your session is a good idea, of your event. I think also what Heidi said of the idea of the gardens being this space within a space that holds that is a really great idea. There is something random about open space, which is an incredibly important part of the creativity. That stochastic element that makes chance encounters happen. It does happen in like who turns up, but there's something else going on. And I would say, there's some kind of software program that, I don't know, could make everybody jumble round for a bit at a certain point. I don't know what that is, but that's a good question to ask, I think, and research.
That's what we did.
Well, team, this has been fantastic. We got to the top of the hour. I saw that there were a few more questions. There was one quick one from Anne. What is the total number of folks who have roles in the whole event, including the people who worked on access and other roles?
So me, Phelan, and Lee as a trio of facilitators. We had Ben, one of our colleagues, who was helping to coordinate the Bsl interpreters. I think the reasoning was it was way easier for him to have that as a sole responsibility rather than me having to field the tech questions that were happening in the main space by my emails in my text, as well as having to coordinate the interpreters. So that's 4. And then we had Hannah Quigley, who was the access support worker. And I think that's it. Is that right? I mean, other members of the Improbable team, I think, were present, but I don't think they were there as participants, rather than, so the 5 of us basically. And then if you include the interpreters and captioners, we had 7 interpreters, 4 captioners. Sorry, really bad. Forgot our student placement, Imogen. Who so there's 6, technically 6 people if you're not counting the BSL captioners. And what Imogen was doing was we had a visually impaired participant. So one of the workarounds we did was we created a document with we pulled out all of the Zoom meeting IDs of each space. And as the sessions were being called, Imogen was putting those session titles next to the Zoom meeting IDs, just because this particular participant wasn't able to use Kiko Chat because she normally has her screen magnified, and she wasn't seeing any of the options. So we thought it'd be easier for her just to join the Zoom chats directly, but wanted to still maintain that sense of free movement around the spaces. So we effectively sent her at the end of Opening Circle this document that we compiled with the session titles and the meeting IDs, and then just said, you can join these Zoom meetings directly as you would any other Zoom meeting. And that seemed to work really well.
I've got one thing I want to mention. iPads.
Oh.
So I would say the fly in the ointment is people trying to navigate the whole thing on iPads. It's possible, but it will, if you don't flag get onto a computer if you possibly can, it will take up a lot of your time fielding people who are trying to navigate it on iPads. It is possible, but that's where the work happens.
Well, we're at the top of our hour, so to respect everyone's time, we'll close here. There was one moment when I listened to your opening, Phelan, which I thought was particularly poignant. You asked a question that was when I saw the actual event, you asked a question of something like, you had a great pause, and people were waiting for the next thing that you were about to say. And you said something like, if you have a question in your mind about whether you should or you shouldn't, then you should. And then it unlocked even more people proposing even deeper session topics. And that was so phenomenal to see. So thank you for that.
Yeah, I think the thing about opening space is you're holding this paradox of a threshold that people have to get over to call a session. And it's an interesting discussion around access, because that threshold has to be an invitation that so you have to make sure that people who want to get over that threshold can get over that threshold, but you have to allow them to feel that threshold. And sometimes you need to support them on that before they'll bring that marginal issue in that's really important. So I think it's a big part of holding the space, of how one is aware of and navigates that. In embodied world, you can feel the atmosphere. Often you can feel whether sessions are latent. It's really hard when you're looking at boxes of different people. So you really have to trust. And there's a journey that people who are learning how to do this have to learn, of picking up signals. They're more visual. of whether people are ready to, have they finished all their sessions, or it's a different skill. I don't know how to do it yet, but sometimes it involves imagining what the atmosphere in the room would be like at this point. And very often there's an invitation involved. So get your sessions out. I'm gonna open the marketplace soon. It's your last chance. If you're thinking maybe you should, maybe you shouldn't, maybe you should. The usual things that help people: asking for support. Does someone want support in the chat to help them, crystallize what that session might be? All those things are facilitation. Finding out our ways to do that online it's an interesting journey.
Thank you very much to the Improbable team. You broke some new ground here, and you very generously shared your learnings with us. Thank you to everybody who attended today. So you could feel free to turn your mics on, and we'll see you next time.
Yeah, see you. Bye. Thank you.
Thank you.
So that was fantastic. Thank you.
Bsl and team, I'm so inspired.
I look forward to maybe one day making it to one. So great. Thank you.
Inspiring.
It's hugely important what you're contributing, and I hope there'll be more. Thank you very, very much.
Heidi, I missed what you were saying.
Well, I've spent a lot of time doing unconferences, so doing open space in a conference setting, which is very powerful. And most of the people who come to IIW now don't like going to any other kind of conference. They don't like going, sitting, and listening. But what this conversation brought back to me are the open spaces that I've done that aren't conferences, that are people who have a common interest and come together, and all the nuances. And it was really wonderful to hear you all talk about that in context of online events. And I'll be much better prepared to help, as a part of the Kiko team, future open space facilitators think about the facilitation part, the access part, and the nuances, as you say, Phelim. I love that line, if you should or shouldn't. That is a very good way to articulate what we would normally feel as facilitators if we were standing in the room, being able to see people. So thank you so much. So much fun.
Pleasure. Love to you all.
Thank you so much.